As recently as 50,000 years ago, there were at least 4 other kinds of humans sharing this planet with us, and some of them are so strange, so recently discovered, that they break the rules we thought we understood. A human the size of a child, a species known from almost no bones at all, a population that may have survived into the age of agriculture. These are the branches that don't make the textbook diagrams, the ones we found by accident, and the ones we are still finding. They were not our ancestors. They were our cousins, our contemporaries, our rivals, separate experiments in what it might mean to be human. They did not stay apart. They met. They interbred. And some of the populations tangled in that story are ones we have never even found. These are the humans that history forgot. Beneath the grasslands of South Africa lies a cave system called Rising Star. To reach its furthest chamber, a person must squeeze through a crack, barely 18 centimeters wide. What lay at the bottom rewrote a chapter of human origins. Scattered across the floor were the bones of at least 15 individuals of a kind no one had ever seen, Homo naledi, and they were a contradiction. Their brain size was around 500 cubic centimeters, squarely in Australopithecus territory, a third the size of ours. Yet their hands were almost startlingly modern, their wrists built for tool use, and their legs and feet made for long-distance walking. An ancient brain, wearing a modern body. Then came the dating, and its own shock. Homo naledi did not live in the deep past its anatomy suggested. It lived between roughly 300,000 and 200,000 years ago, close enough to overlap with the earliest members of our own species. This was not a primitive ancestor frozen in time. It was a primitive-looking cousin, alive alongside early modern humans. But the deepest mystery is the cave itself. How did 15 bodies come to rest in a chamber so hard to reach, with no sign of predators, no flooding, no other way in? Some researchers proposed something extraordinary, that Homo naledi carried its dead into the dark on purpose. The claim is fiercely contested and the evidence far from settled. But it forces an uncomfortable question. How much of what we call humanity is really about the size of the brain? And how much is about something we still cannot measure? On the Indonesian island of Flores, in a cave called Liang Bua, archaeologists uncovered a skeleton that seemed to belong to a fairy tale. The adult female stood barely 1 meter tall, and her brain was around 420 cubic centimeters, smaller even than Naledi's, at the very bottom of the hominin range. They named the species Homo floresiensis and nicknamed her the Hobbit. Yet she was fully bipedal, made stone tools, and hunted. And she was no distant relic. Her kind survived on Flores until around 50,000 years ago, perhaps still alive when the first modern humans reached the region. How does a human end up so small? The leading answer is island dwarfism. On isolated islands, large-bodied animals shrink over generations under pressure from limited food and few predators. The same deposits on Flores yielded dwarf elephants and oversized rats, the signature of an island running its own evolutionary experiments. But there is a rival idea, and it is more unsettling, that the Hobbit's most primitive features, her tiny brain, her archaic wrist and shoulder, are simply too old to have come from a recent human ancestor, that she descended instead from something far earlier, a small-bodied lineage that left Africa long before anyone thought such a journey was possible. Two possible histories and the same small skull sitting between them. Further north, on the Philippine island of Luzon, an even fainter trace was found. Not a skeleton, but a scatter of teeth and a few small hand and foot bones in Calao Cave. From these fragments, scientists described another new human in 2019, Homo luzonensis, living at least 67,000 years ago. The pieces told a peculiar story. Some teeth were small and simple, almost modern, yet the finger and toe bones were strongly curved, the mark of an ancestor that still climbed. This was a mosaic, modern and archaic traits in the same individual, echoing the pattern seen in Naledi and the Hobbit. But the real puzzle is not the anatomy, it is the address. Luzon has been an island, cut off by deep water for the entire span of human existence. No land bridge ever reached it, even at the lowest Ice Age sea levels. So how did an archaic human, with no boats we can see and no sailing tradition we can trace, cross open ocean to a remote island and survive there not as a single castaway, but as a founding population lasting tens of thousands of years? The sea was supposed to be a barrier. For these humans, somehow, it was a road. Every species so far was known by its bones. The next was almost invisible. In Denisova Cave, in the mountains of southern Siberia, researchers found a single fragment of a girl's finger bone, small enough to hide under a fingernail. Instead of measuring its shape, they sequenced its DNA. The genome belonged to no known human, a previously unknown population, sister group to the Neanderthals that had spread across Asia. That much you may know. But the genome held stranger things still. Buried inside the Denisovan DNA was the signature of an even older, super archaic human, a ghost lineage nobody has ever found a fossil of, that the Denisovans themselves had once interbred with. A mystery folded inside a mystery. And they were not one people. When modern humans met Denisovans, they interbred more than once, in more than one place. The Denisovan DNA carried by living New Guineans traces to a different population than the one that mixed into mainland Asia. Then a jawbone from the high Tibetan plateau, identified through ancient proteins, revealed Denisovans had also adapted to brutal, high-altitude cold. And here is the strangest part. They never fully left. Today, populations across Asia and the Pacific still carry their DNA. And in Tibet, a Denisovan gene lets people breathe the thin mountain air. As a people, they are gone. Fragments of them are still alive. The last of our forgotten humans is the most recent and the most uncertain. In caves in southwestern China, researchers uncovered fossils with an unusual blend of features: a broad face, a heavy brow, a skull that looked far older than it had any right to. Because deer bones lay among the remains, they were nicknamed the Red Deer Cave People. What makes them remarkable is their age, between roughly 14,000 and 11,500 years old. That is not the age of a distant ancestor. That is the dawn of agriculture, the same window in which humans elsewhere were domesticating crops and raising the first villages. For years, the question was whether they were a separate, late-surviving, archaic species. Then ancient DNA, recovered from one of the skulls, pointed a different way, toward modern humans, part of the East Asian lineage, not a distinct species at all. But that only sharpens the real puzzle. Why does a modern human skull, just 11,000 years old, look so deeply archaic? Deep population structure, long isolation, a lingering trace of older ancestry? We do not yet know. Science does not always resolve its mysteries. Sometimes it just learns to hold them and wait for better evidence. Consider how each of these humans came to light. A finger bone in Siberia, a scatter of teeth in a Philippine cave, a skeleton at the bottom of a crack, too narrow for most adults to enter. Everyone was found by accident, or by squeezing into a place almost no one had looked. Which raises a dizzying question. How many others have we never found at all? We already know of at least one. That ghost lineage hidden inside Denisovan DNA, an entire kind of human, real enough to leave its mark in a genome that has never given up a single bone. A species does not owe us a fossil. Bones survive only under rare conditions. Most bodies simply vanish. Whole populations could have lived for 100,000 years and disappeared without a trace we would recognize. But the tools are changing. We no longer need a skeleton. DNA can be pulled from a fragment of finger, from a strip of protein in a jaw, even from the bare dust of a cave floor where a human once slept, long after every bone has crumbled to nothing. Somewhere in that dust, in a cave not yet entered, there are almost certainly humans we have never met, branches of our own family that flowered and fell in silence. For most of our history, we were never alone. We have only recently become so, and the full shape of the family we lost is still, for now, waiting in the dark.